Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor, and we are going to jump into this one straight away with both feet, with both webbed feet as it were, because I'm going to paint and draw, or I should say draw and paint a goose. This one, to be exact, was a royalty-free photo I think I found on Unsplash, might have been Pixabay, I'm not sure. You can probably find it there. Patrons, I'll have it for you. But what I'm doing today is drawing in graphite, a quite extensive drawing actually, and then I'm going to paint over that. And this is one of my favorite techniques. You may not know that because I don't do it very often, at least not for the channel. And I can't tell you why that is because I forget, I guess, this is probably the reason. I forget how much I love the technique until I do it. And then after I do it, I think, that was so much fun. Why haven't I done this more often? It's really a great technique, and we're going to talk about the reasons why. So I'm working in my B 100% cotton watercolor sketchbook, and I wish I could give you links for this. I don't think they're currently being made or sold. You can buy B paper. Anyway, my original intention was just to do a pencil study, and I was going to take a picture and then transfer it to other watercolor paper for a fuller painting, like maybe some Arches paper or something else. So this is a very, very extensive drawing. And one of the things I like to do is do a very detailed drawings for studies and then reduce that detail as I paint. But let's get into the reasons why I think this is such a great technique and why it's one of my favorites. First of all, it's perfect for beginners. As a beginner, if you're just learning watercolor, you're learning how to get the paint wet, how to put it on the paper, spread it around, get nice clean washes, get blends. The pencil can do a lot of that for you. So it becomes more of a coloring process. So if you're feeling a little bit shy, a little bit iffy about watercolor, this is a great way to start. Most all artists started out by drawing and know how to shade with a pencil. The second reason that I love it so much is pencil, especially when it's put down lightly, is extremely forgivable. Until you add those watercolor washes, you can erase pencil very easily. When you add watercolor washes, it tends to set that graphite into the paper, and then it's very difficult, if not impossible, to erase. But up until that point, you can just put as much detail as you want, can correct, you can do all kinds of things. It's funny because I just don't see this sort of technique done that often. It's usually done like an outline, or maybe they do a pre-pencil study on another piece of paper just so they have something to guide them. But regardless of how you're doing it or why, the pencil is very forgivable. And if you put it down, and this is what I recommend, you put it down very, very lightly, do all your shading in very low-key tones. You can still have a range of values from light to dark, but it's very forgivable. It's easy to erase. And while we're on the subject of graphite and how it sort of tones the washes, gets that graphite look in there, I love the look. I mean, it's a different look. It's a colored graphite look. Yeah, it's a little bit grayer, but it has this sort of vintage feel that's just very neat, I think, very elegant. And if you keep the pencil light, the darker you make your tones, the more you bring that dynamic value range into deeper deeps, the more you're going to cover up that pencil, and you'll never see it anyway. So there's that flexibility. But I just love the look. I love the feel of it. In the case of a lot of watercolor paintings over graphite, you can't even tell that you did it. Now, the third reason I love this technique so much is you can use it so many different ways. You can use just line work. You can get that line work just as detailed as you want it. You can go into full shading the way I did on this. You can add just a tiny bit of watercolor, just enough to tint it in spots. You can do half and half. You can do half of your drawing in color and leave the rest for the beauty of the graphite and all the shading or the strokes. Your pencil can be loose and your watercolor can be loose with it, or your pencil can be tight and your watercolor can be extremely loose over that tight watercolor. There's just a variety of styles. You can go very linear with the pencil, almost like a line and wash. You can get very dark with the pencil, make it look almost like an ink line. So it's just extremely, extremely flexible. The next reason I really, really love this technique is it separates the drawing from the painting. This goes back to something that makes it easier for beginners, but it's just also a very enjoyable Zen process. I love drawing. I just absolutely love drawing. And sometimes when I feel like, oh, maybe I should be doing a watercolor painting, but I'd rather be doing a drawing, it's great to be able to combine the two. But it separates the two disciplines. So when I'm drawing, I love drawing. I love getting into the drawing. It sort of simplifies the process. You're dealing with one tool, one value, one color. You can get into that detail, that shading if you really, really want to. Then when you go to paint, the details are already there. It just brings a joy to the whole process that's a little different than other types of watercolor painting or other styles. So the last reason I think I really love this technique, and this is something I've only discovered recently, it is a great way to reduce detail and still maintain a high degree of realism, if that's your goal. How do you say that, Steve? I mean, how in the world does it do that? Well, if you're not real good at reducing detail in your painting, and again, my mantra has always been, detail does not equal realism. You can put a lot of detail in your paintings and they won't necessarily look realistic. Realism is about form, dynamic values, getting those accurate, and just enough detail to convince the eye to suggest what you're seeing there. But the dynamics of light and shade and proper form and good drawing are always the key to good realism. So my goal ever since being an illustrator has always been, when I need to do something extremely realistic, is how to get great detail and realism without actually putting it in.
Talk to me, Goose.
That's a real art in and of itself. Well, you're looking at one of those ways right here. And when I started this, as I said, I thought I was just going to do a pencil study. Thankfully, I did it in a watercolor sketchbook. But I thought, now wait a minute. I can watercolor this right here, and I can decide if I want all that pencil detail in there or not. I'll put all of it in. I'll put in as much as I want to put in until I'm happy that I have enough that I can see that goose in all its glory, you know, the feathers, the values, the detail of the wings, all that stuff. And then as I watercolor over it, I can decide how much to reduce that, because that watercolor actually subdues and hides a lot of that graphite. Really an interesting thing, especially again, if you put it down lightly. So I'm thinking, as I'm going over this, I'm combining similar values where the detail would get lost and, you know, to the eye anyway. I'm leaving areas that are completely white that were actually in the photo. You know, the naked eye could pick it up in the photo, but I thought it's not necessary to the piece. We'll have some bright white values. We'll have some lost and found lines or edges. Maybe the water ripples define the edge of the wing, as you can see there, the upper wing. And I'll leave out a lot of that feather detail, but I'll hint at it. I'll lead the eye that way with a suggestion of that detail. How much of that can I do? How much of that detail can I leave out while still implying a high degree of realism? And as I started thinking about this concept, using graphite first and then watercolor just really made that process easy. Easy to visualize, easy to think about, easier to accomplish. If you go directly in with paint, maybe you just drew this goose in an outline, and you said, well, I'm going to reduce the detail from what I see in the photo. I'm going to be more suggestive with it, and you go straight in with your paint. Now, if you're a skilled painter, you can do that, but it's going to be trial and error. You're going to say, well, if I did this, okay, that works there, it works there. Maybe it doesn't work so much there. Okay, I could do it over and try again. And that's fine too. What I found is doing watercolor over detailed graphite sketch helped me make those decisions, helped me visualize where I can combine values, where I can suggest detail, where I don't need to paint it all in. So I started doing that. Really a very neat benefit. So yeah, if one of your goals is to paint, be very realistic, but simplify detail and get better at suggesting detail, go ahead, draw that subject in all its glorious detail. Put it all in if you want to. Make sure the drawing's right. Make sure you have good dynamic values. And then as you paint over it, start deciding, Where can I combine values? Where can I leave out detail? Maybe in shadows, maybe in highlights where it's not needed. Where can I suggest a little bit that the eye will continue it? The mind's eye is very powerful. It can continue the illusion of detail when it's not really there. So it's fun. It becomes like a game, but it also is training your eye, training the way you paint. Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most exciting things that I've learned about drawing in graphite and painting with watercolor. I'm not saying you need to do a detailed drawing and sketch every time. You don't. But it's one way to do it, especially if you're going for a high degree of realism. Well, we're coming to the end of this. Going to bring this goose in for a landing, as it were. All right, well, just to sum up about how the detail was reduced in this piece in particular, everywhere I had a lot of detail in the darker values, I could either paint directly to that detail and enhance it, or I could cover it up. The pencil was so light, it was very easy to cover up. So basically, I could enter sort of an editing mode and easily sort of meld detail together or paint exactly to it. In the lighter areas, such as the areas I decided to leave white, I can easily erase it because no paint was put there. Well, I'm just going to finish up here with some details using a white gel pen, Jelly Roll gel pen, particularly in the splashes in the water. And I'm going to shade his head, and then we'll be done. And this was just such an enjoyable technique, and I hope you'll try it. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you watching. Minders, you're the best. And patrons, thank you for supporting this channel. We'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.